Welcome aboard to the IoT For All podcast. Thanks for being here this week.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I know our company's been working together for a while, so it's good to have you on. Let's kick things off by having you give a quick introduction about yourself to our audience.
I'm the CTO and co-founder of Monogoto. More than 30 years experience in the telco industry, infrastructure, building cellular providers, and the last 4 years focusing in building Monogoto as a software-defined connectivity cloud.
Can you dive into that a little bit more? Kind of what you all are doing. What does that mean? Like what you all are focused on, kind of the role you play in the industry, and how that kind of compares to maybe what people are familiar with.
Absolutely. Maybe I will also add a small suggestion to upgrade IoT for all for software-defined connectivity for all. The role that we are playing in the industry is that we saw a few transformations in the infrastructure space. We saw the transformation that happened to cloud compute. It used to be servers, and today it's CPU, GPU storage, or cloud compute. And then we saw another big transformation on the communication industry. You remember the days of voice, IPPBX, and all kind of phone system that we used to have parallel to us communicating, or while we're communicating with the operators, and look at us today doing a voice over IP podcast session with probably Twilio or some other cloud infrastructure in the background. And Monogoto is playing on a similar go-to-market on the connectivity space. So if it used to be M2M, and then we called it IoT, the next generation is that connectivity is part of the context. Exactly like we're on a video call and voice is part of the context. I'm not calling you through AT&T. Or the same thing on compute. Before the days of SaaS, I had to buy the software and server separate. We are moving into an industry that is much more than best effort internet connectivity. We are moving to an industry that will need low latency sometimes and high throughput in other times, and maybe to reserve battery in other. And the ability for you to control it with API, that's where any infrastructure should be. So we are petitioning to change the name to software-defined connectivity. And we are heavily invested ourselves in APIs and in capabilities. So an IoT developer can have a use case that sometime on satellite, sometime on private, sometime on public, sometime on low latency, sometime high throughput, and all through APIs.
You've mentioned software-defined connectivity for all. You kind of broke it down there a little bit. How does that, if I'm listening to this, how does that kind of differentiate between traditional IoT connectivity? Like, what is it that's unique that somebody maybe unfamiliar needs to understand and know?
I think that any software-defined or cloud platform needs to follow few basic rules of lowering the barriers so innovation can come. If I go to the AWS days, Dropbox grew up inside AWS, and somebody like AWS could nourish such an innovation. And software defined needs to lower the barrier in time, in expertise, and in money. Meaning, if a developer have the next idea for connected robots and he want it to be global, we don't expect them to go and talk to multiple operators. If you want to secure it, I don't want them to work too hard. Instead of they, as the developer, being issued all the day in the how, they can remove it. And companies like us that provide cloud will handle the how, and they can just provide focus on the use case.
So if we talk about kind of real world problems that you all are seeing kind of, I guess, lead the way where IoT and all of this is going to really play a role now and into the future, especially for what you all do specifically, what are some of those real world problems that you all solve for enterprises, especially those maybe operating with kind of private 5G, CBRS, any kind of hybrid network? Just like what is it that leads the way when you're talking to customers and you're working with people, that's really kind of, I guess, driving you all forward?
Yeah, let's think about some use cases, maybe without naming names, but we'll cover some cases. So think about a company that will do automation in factories. For them, connectivity is critical because they have robots that are moving, maybe drones that are flying. So the best practice for them today to use Wi-Fi, and Wi-Fi is not reliable. network. Wi-Fi is a network that was never designed to give different SLA for different type of capabilities. And if you want suddenly high throughput or lower latency, that's not the best practice, especially if you want to cover in warehouses and in manufacturing a lot of ground. So a private 5G in such use case is a perfect fit. Now, do you want the private 5G in the old way of doing things, meaning lots of money and time until you deploy, or do you want to deploy it in the cloud way? And when you do it in the cloud way, you also benefit because the use case is not all the time on private. Think about the last mile delivery. In the warehouse, you need low latency and private, but when the last mile delivery is going to deliver the package to me, it will probably use AT&T or T-Mobile net. So that's one example on private. Let's move it to the satellite, and that's another way that software defined and private network, but a different kind of private network can shine. Think about any agriculture use case or use cases that you want to track a package or any animal, so very popular that is not with cellular coverage. So suddenly we have cellular over satellite, and a software-defined approach can fall back to satellite when cellular is not available.
And does this kind of all go to what you mentioned earlier around these use cases are requiring more than kind of that quote unquote best effort internet? What does that exactly mean in the context of connectivity for enterprises and these IoT applications?
When we're talking about the neutrality of the internet is less relevant when we talk 5G and slicing, and different use cases deserve different capabilities. So a camera is a great example of a use case that without a solid X megabit per second cannot be operational, and somebody needs to guarantee this SLA. So either you will run a cable or you will use a private 5G, but in some use cases, you need to guarantee specific bandwidth. Other use cases, you want to guarantee specific latency. Maybe on a specific use case, I want to be on a sub 100 millisecond latency. And now I need to be able with an API to make sure that this is what I'm getting. Maybe I will make sure that the data will not leave the US, so the latency will be low. And that's all go back to use cases that are becoming more and more reliant on connectivity and dependent on one service that will give it to them. Otherwise, it will be hard to justify that.
And I wanted to ask you something too about just other technologies that are kind of coming to the forefront of these conversations that we've had in the past with other guests, and maybe just private conversations I've had with people around. We actually did some podcast episodes. I think it was either earlier this year, end of last year, around SGP32. We talked about non-terrestrial networks. We've been talking about private 5G networks. These are all getting a lot of attention, kind of in conversations that we've seen and we've been kind of privy to. What about these technologies are you seeing kind of really cause that attention, and what are you most excited about in the next wave of the software-defined connectivity that you're talking about already?
Great question, and a few points that we need to cover. We'll start with the SIM card, and it's funny. We are a software company, but we still ship SIM cards. And our promise to our investors that the SIM cards will be virtualized and we will stop selling hardware. So I do have a SIM card on my desk all the time, but SGP32 and it will take a few years until the chip will be more available, or the chip industry will be more available with this LPA protocol. But SGP32 is the last piece that we need to virtualize. So we want a device to come out of the factory with some identity bolted on the device. The industry call it today bootstrap. It can be Monogoto bootstrap, it can be AT&T bootstrap, it can be any other operator. But the ability to get the connectivity from the get-go, it's a game changer for especially companies like us that wants to stay on the feature side and software defined. So on the eSIM side, I'm very excited. It's a new era that companies like Monogoto will have a bigger play because we are doing over the top, and because the SIM is being the last friction or stickiness that is being removed. The stickiness for the network will not be because I already have a SIM card and no one can change it. The stickiness will be because of the features that we support. So that's on on the identity side, on the eSIM. And Monogoto is focusing in all kind of. So we have SGP32, we have iSIM, we have new SIM, which is another nice initiative. We have also soft SIM, which is for companies that wants to create a disposable device, and even the profile cost is too much. On the NTN side, it's also very exciting because we are moving from a world that the MNOs were dominant to an over-the-top play, where sometimes you can be on the MNO connectivity, sometimes you can be on a satellite. We are partnering with Skylo on the NTN side. We love, of course, what Elon is doing with satellites, and they're doing it now with T-Mobile. But this is good because it will drive more and more a low orbit constellation to provide 5G, and that will just remove so much friction for companies that wants to have a global connectivity. And for us, it's great because the more operators that will play well with cloud, it's only better for Monogoto and honestly for the connectivity for everyone, because connectivity, when it will be commoditized more and more use cases will use it, and that's the best.
Totally agree. Yeah. And what about on the private 5G side?
That's also very promising, and we will need to see where it's heading. The regulator is very friendly to private networks and essentially give a resource almost for free. So there is a resource in the US, there is a resource in Europe and in other countries. It's mostly on the sub 6 gigahertz frequency on the 3.5, and this is called CBRS in the US. Any company can deploy private. The the way that we think this will evolve in the beginning, big companies, John Deere are very vocal about it, will move the manufacturing to 5G. Then there will be another curve of smaller companies, warehouses, and large facilities that will deploy 5G. Then, and that's already we're starting to see campuses and other venues that have large amount of people and want to provide coverage in those places will deploy neutral host, which will be a combination of public and private. And in the end, it will also be more of uh, capitalism, where companies will just deploy networks and sell it back to the operators.
Let's say we look out the next 5 years or so in the connectivity space. What's a bold prediction or something that you're most looking forward to, or I guess kind of expecting to happen, that is maybe a little under the radar in terms of like the big headlines that are being made right now? What do you think happens over the next 5 years?
I think in the next 5 years, satellite will play significant role. We see more and more constellations that are starting to provide two type of connectivity: the fixed wireless access and the mobility, the IoT. Both of them, both technologies are going towards 5G. So we can look at a single protocol to switch between terrestrial and not terrestrial, which is very exciting. And I think this is going to be evolving much faster than private network and other industries. Parallel to that, I think that security is going to play a big part in the next 5 years. People understand the vulnerability of IoT, and enterprises will have to provide better cyber posture for themselves when they deploy IoT, and they will need platforms like what we have to provide the audit, the capability to block, and the visibility to see what's going on. And on the private side, I think that maybe 5 years, maybe a little bit more, I'm not sure, maybe less, hopefully, we will start to see roaming, meaning we will start to see MVNOs, and we will start to see car companies that are offloading traffic from the cellular providers to 5G networks. And that's something that eventually will happen. We are very curious about the timing.
Yeah, I think the satellite stuff has been something that we've been talking about. It feels like for quite a while now. So the more mature that gets, and the more able to kind of be brought in to help solve a lot of these use cases that just have had a tough time being solved. I think I'm most excited to kind of see that. So I'm kind of in line with your thoughts and projections over the next few years, just to kind of see that really take off more than it already has. And as you mentioned, the different types of existing kind of terrestrial connectivity are already working to kind of partner with the satellite side so that they can increase connectivity and enable more of those use cases, which is great to see.
I think it's eventually an ecosystem play. And what's make me very happy is that Morata, Nordic, Quicktail, Simcom, all of them are deploying now NTN. And when you have an ecosystem of, I think, all of the module makers that are adding end to end, this is making the pie of solutions much bigger. And we are talking to hundreds of companies that are moving from proprietary satellite modem and proprietary satellite contract to a single module and a single contract that provide terrestrial and non-terrestrial. So it's a big shift in the industry.
So for our listeners out there that are working in IoT or enterprise connectivity, what's one piece of advice that you think they need to hear right now? If you like take into account all the conversations that you've had internally, also externally with customers, what do you think is the one thing that people are maybe misunderstanding or really need to kind of, I guess, realign their mindset around and understand, given kind of where we are in the market?
I'm biased. I want cellular. LoRa and other protocols are great for some use cases, but I think that when you deploy a new solution or when you start to develop a new solution, first sometimes I'm getting not frustrated, but I meet companies that are in early days and they rule out cellular because they think it's too expensive. They think it's come with $10 per month. It's not the case today. Today, we can justify use cases on cellular and you can even add it to the bill of materials. So companies that are new to the greenfield, that are new, should look for solution provider like us that to remove a lot of the friction. When a company today deploy a new service, a SaaS, they go to AWS. They are not buying hardware. When a company wants to send SMS, they're going to Twilio. They're not really calling AT&T for sending SMS. And the same thing for connectivity. When you're a startup, when you're an enterprise, when you want to add the connectivity to a product, go with a cloud provider. Will remove so much friction and time.
This has been fantastic. I appreciate you kind of taking the time. For audience who wants to learn more about what you all have going on, maybe connect with you as a follow up, reach out in any capacity. What's the best way they can do all that?
We are a very bottom-up company, so anything, we will find you. Go to the chat, email us. You can find us on LinkedIn. We have lots of not giveaway, but we have lots of trials that we can do with customers to demonstrate our capabilities. So any platform is working to get in touch with us.
That's awesome. Well, again, truly appreciate the time. Pleasure to have you on. Glad we were able to do this. We'll definitely have you back later this year, and we'll kind of catch up on all the progress that's being made in the space. See how things are going over on your end, and go from there. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you.